Good evening, folks. This is your Factivist Report for Monday, the 28th of November, which should have been Sunday, the 27th of November, but we had to move it to Monday, so it is now right here with Dave, and we're going to be talking about, what is it?
It is representation. And what the Democrats represent and what the Republicans represent, it's basically talking about the need for inclusivity and how we can get that more. So we're going to, and a little bit of different things sprinkled in here and there, you know, the future of the Senate and the future of the House, all that crap. So the very first thing I want to talk about is what we have seen in the Democratic Party versus what we have seen in the Republican Party, specifically Biden's administration. So with Biden's cabinet, he created a historic diversity in his cabinet. That was one of the first things that he could control, and he did it. There's a little article here. I'm not going to go into all the different cabinet positions. We have the first African American here, the first LGBT transportation secretary, and Pete Buttigieg. We have Rachel Levine, who was the first transgender in the cabinet. I know it was an assistant position, but he created history. And what did that help do over time? I honestly think that helped create a diverse field of candidates making history by being elected in the midterms. You had a Gen Z, the first Gen Z guy to be elected in Florida. You had two gay female governors elected in Maura Healey and Tina Kotek. Yeah. So, and on down the line. Okay, you had.
By the way, overall, 400 LGBTQ candidates won nationwide. Okay, and a lot of women, in governor positions.
Yeah, exactly. So, what do Republicans stand for? Now, I have a Hill article, and if you notice, I'm not doing screen share. No, I'm not doing screen share because I'm afraid that things are going to freeze and get weird. So you guys will have all of these articles to read for yourself on your very own. It's a little project. And
remember all of that shit? All that reading stuff?
Yeah.
Does a body good. Yep.
Plenty of reading material here. The basic gist is that this Hill article, let's see, I want to give credit to the person who wrote it, if I can. It's Albert Hunt, and this is from January of 2022. So what the Republicans stand for, it's not people, it's ideals, quote unquote. Lower taxes, a smaller federal government, conservative on social issues like pro-life, anti-gun control, and the self-styled party of family values, whatever the fuck that means. A robust national defense and less consensus on foreign policy, with an exception, strong support for Israel. So this is according to this article.
I also like to say strong support for Vladimir Putin. And I would also like to say that, you know, the notion that the Republicans stand for smaller federal government is a pile of shit, because they're in your bedroom, they're in your doctor's office with you, they're telling you how to raise your fucking kids, and they're telling you how to teach your fucking kids. So I'm tired of hearing all that shit. They stand for racism, bigotry, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, fascism. I'm tired of dancing on the bullshit.
Yeah, that basically what this article is saying is that's the old Republicans, and the last old Republican was Liz Cheney. She's no longer in anyway. That's one Republican who checks all these boxes is Liz Cheney, the congresswoman from Wyoming, who, even though we disagreed with her on most of that, she at least stood up against Trump Now, what do they really stand for? And who do they stand for? The Christian right and Donald Trump and themselves. That's who they stand for.
Right.
Just so you know.
I'd also like to throw a monkey wrench into the thought process, by the way, that, you know, Ron DeSatan can return the GOP to its old heyday. He is a freaking authoritarian fascist ruler. He's got a little laboratory of fascist rule going on down there in Florida. He's taking it for a test spin for when he runs for the presidency. Don't be fooled by Ron DeSantis, okay?
So I'm not going to beat around the bush in terms of the 2024 Senate. It's going to be rough for us, for the Democrats. There are several senators who are considering retiring. Dianne Feinstein might retire. That might not be that big of a deal because you do have some good candidates there. Hopefully you can get somebody in that will be able to stay. But you have John Tester in Montana, which is always a vulnerable state. You have Sherrod Brown, who, because J.D. Vance won in Ohio, the Republicans are licking their chops there. And, of course, you have the blue dogs that we consider, Kristen Sinema, they're already talking about primarying her. And then, of course, you have Joe Manchin, sorry. So one thing I'm going to say is that we have an opportunity right now to get one more Senate seat. We have to do it. Okay.
We do.
There's a reason that we need to do it because we're kind of behind the 8 ball right now. We can't afford to lose that seat. We just can't.
We need the 51st senator. And by the way, just so you know, when Herschel Walker saw the results of the early voting, he wants to get rid of that. Well, you can imagine why he would want to get rid of that, because it's certainly not going in his favor. But like I've said to everybody, you know what? I know they've broken records. I think there was something like, I don't know how many people came out on Sunday. It was a lot, you know, and 80,000, I think it was, in Georgia to vote. Don't be fooled by this, because typically speaking, the early voters are the Democratic voters, the latecomers, and the people who don't do early voting are GOP people. So we need, just keep going, folks. Whatever's going on in Georgia, it goes to December 6th. We need Raphael Warnock in there, not just because of the 51st number, but I want you to picture fucking Herschel Walker in the Senate, if you can, without laughing. Because if you think we're a laughing stock now, just wait. It's going to get worse if he's in there. He's completely unable to deal with reality on his own. He's always got 2 senators flanking him for a reason. All right? He can't handle life in general. I'm sorry.
And not only that, he's dangerous.
He is dangerous.
He's talked about assaulting people. He's just a potentially dangerous candidate.
By the way, he also listed the state of Texas as his permanent residence on his taxes. So right now he's also in violation of being able to run in the state of Georgia. God only knows why he's even running there. I don't understand that, but I'm sure the Republicans do.
Right. So the next, okay. So we talked about that. So let's see here. So one of the things that I noticed, Deb can talk about this. Everybody talks about money in politics and how there's an obscene amount of money spent in politics, and a big part of this is advertising. I was taught this very early on. You have 2 brands. Let's just say you have Coke and you have Pepsi. Pepsi cuts their advertising budget in half. All of a sudden, people think that it's not as popular because it's not out there as much, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Kind of what happened in Florida, okay? The last election, the Florida Democratic Party, they spent over $50 million on Florida elections. In 2022, they spent 1.5. Charlie Crist didn't have a chance. Okay, just understand that.
And by the way, let me just say this. That was a big fucking mistake, all right? Because they spent $50 million on a candidate who was more than flawed when he ran, okay? And I know Ron DeSantis didn't beat him by much. Had they funded Charlie Crist, I really believe Charlie Crist would have run over Ron DeSantis with a freight train. I really do believe that.
Right.
Redistricting aside, I really do believe that would have happened. This is the basic tenet of advertising. If you are not going to bother to run your ad with frequency, don't bother to make your ad. You're spending X amount of dollars to create an ad, somewhere in the range of $25,000 to $50,000 just to create the ad itself. If you are not going to spend upwards of $100,000 running that ad, you are wasting your time. It's the same thing in politics. Out of sight, out of mind. It's the way it works. It's the way the American mind works. And we have done studies on advertising, and this is nothing more than brand advertising before an election. That's the way it has to be looked at.
And in all honesty, I hope that Florida, gets their stuff straight, because if you take a look at Charlie Crist and his debates against DeSantis, he eviscerated him. In terms of showing his competence, in terms of showing all of that. All of that is out the window, because all that's really seen is the vote count.
Right.
And now people are going to have it in their head that Charlie Crist cannot beat Ron DeSantis. You wasted a really good, moderate Democrat candidate by that gaffe. Now, the Republicans did the same thing by not only with Rick Scott and his shenanigans, and then not being able to fund a lot of these candidates, but they put in crappy candidates, by the way. Dr. Oz, J.D. Vance, even though J.D. Vance won, that's why people are scared, because J.D. Vance was not a quality candidate. Adam Laxalt, Blake Masters, they just threw these guys out there. Herschel Walker.
All of these guys, by the way, I'm not sure that they threw them out there. I totally think at the time they fielded these candidates, Trump was running the party. He was
wildly popular, so maybe that's where we were going with that.
These were all of his little minions. All right.
Right.
These were, you couldn't, if you didn't have a Trump back candidate, then you were in the shitter with him. And if you're in the shitter with him, you got little rats like Mitch McConnell and the GOP leader, I guess that's what he's calling himself, Kevin McCarthy, scurrying around like little rats trying to, jockey for position. They're all bootlickers. This is the bottom line here.
So I just wanted to show this, because we don't really talk about these states that much, because they don't have that many electoral votes. They're way out there in the western part of whatever we consider them, kind of a lost cause, and sometimes that's a mistake. And this is one of those cases. John Tester is a Democratic senator. He's in Montana, and this is a February article. Montana senator criticizes fellow Democrats for not appealing to rural Americans more. So he has a point.
He does.
Now, everybody is going to ask for more representation. That's just the way it is. Not only unions in general, which I will be talking about unions later, but each individual union is going to ask for more representation. That's the way this works. The African-American community, the gay community, women, everybody's going to ask for separate things. But I believe that rural Americans, it's labor, okay? That's what they're looking for. They're looking at economic gains. We're talking about, I'm talking about the area between two mountain ranges, the Appalachians and the Rockies. If we're able to do that, we will provide success. That's how Hillary Clinton lost, okay, by not appealing to the rural voters. That's how Trump won.
Yep.
That's how he won. And we have to also, we have to think of everyone and come up with a cogent message. I honestly think it's the...
Here's the thing. It's not just winning, though. Once you do that, you need to deliver for these people. Okay?
Absolutely.
I don't believe that Donald Trump delivered for the rural Americans.
No, he didn't.
But the point is, we don't want to be just, we don't want to just target these people, sell these people a bill of goods, then turn around and walk away from them. That's not going to benefit us either. It's time for the Democrats to step it up and become really the party of the majority party. I'm sorry, but the majority of people in this country are not MAGA, and they're not Republican. There's probably more old-time Republicans than there are MAGA people. So anyone who's telling you, and I forget which nitwit it was, I think it was Steve Bannon, was on Tucker Carlson saying that 75% of the country is MAGA. You know what? If that were the case, I'd be out of here in like a fucking nanosecond. I don't believe for a second that 75% of America is MAGA. Not even fucking close. They're just the loudest. And
right.
Most dangerous, I might add.
So I just want to go through this real quick. This is something that explains what gerrymandering is. Basically, it's manipulating populations to diminish their voting power. There's two different types. There's splitting up several, the same group, and then there's packing. So it's cracking, and then there's packing. So packing, you're just putting a massive amount of people of the same in one area, which I saw that with District 10 in New York. You put a huge area together instead of separating it and having 2 or 3 Democratic districts. You have one, and then cracking. You're splitting. You're splitting, and creating a disadvantage there. So. And then they go on to talk about a couple of bills that I'm going to be talking about. So let's see here. That's about it. And I'm going to get off this. So we have redistricting typically happens right after a census. And it happens on the 0 year. 2000, 2010, 2020 is when the census happens. And then right after that, you have redistricting. So it's typically every 10 years. And if you notice, right at the beginning of a decade, have you noticed that's when the Republicans have a resurgence? It's because of redistricting and gerrymandering. So,
can I just make a statement?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the census for a minute. Yep. Don't let anyone on the right tell you, don't fill out your census, because that's how the government tracks you. Listen to me.
Yeah.
So that was the big thing just before the 2020 census. Throw your census in the bucket. It's just the government trying to track your every move. This is how the fucking government figures out how districts are built based on where people move. Fill out your fucking census, okay? Just do it.
Right. So again, I'm going to quickly show this one. This is a Washington Post article, and this is by Philip Bump. And I've seen Philip Bump's work before, and it's really good. Republicans may have won the House months ago through redistricting, and Deb went through this. Okay, there were several states that had some very questionable redistricting, and some of them were deemed constitutionally illegal, but they went through anyway. Okay, so we're going to have some fights on our hands in Florida.
One state, the court ruled that racist redistricting, and they went ahead, the GOP went ahead and used that anyway. So when the courts don't have any teeth, what the fuck are people supposed to do? Seriously, folks, I mean this.
So I want to show just the states we're talking about. Florida, there's still a court case out there, okay? We have Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Ohio, and I believe there was North Carolina also. New York, they had some questionable redistricting in New York too. So here we go. This is what I was talking about. This is New York Times. We have 4 states, okay? 4 states were ruled illegal gerrymanders, and they were being used anyway. Okay. Oh. Michael Wines, this is August of 2022. So this is during the primaries. Okay. Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Ohio. And by the way, you had Ron DeSantis, who basically just shoved his own map in, and it was allowed.
Yeah, well, what happened was the Florida legislature, which is entirely GOP, did redistricting and sent it to DeSantis, who vetoed that, and then strong-armed them into letting him do it all by himself, which he did. And he then sent it to them, and he strong-armed them to rubber stamp it, which they did. And then some group brought it to court, and it eventually found its way to the state Supreme Court, which he had stacked with all of his cronies. And that court decided they weren't going to touch it before the midterms.
So this is where that particular court case is now. A federal panel clears the way for a lawsuit challenging Florida's congressional redistricting map. Basically, the argument was that the plaintiffs didn't prove their case, and the argument for the plaintiffs is we don't have to prove our case right now. There just has to be some reasonable explanation, and then we'll go and do all of that. You have to understand, too, that you have to file within a certain amount of time, and then you get some time to really form your case. So we have that now. We have something called the For the People Act. Joe Biden made a statement about it in June. He put this one forward. This is about making it easier to register and try to circumvent some of these voter suppression laws. It was killed. It didn't even make the Senate. And why? Because Joe Manchin voted against it. And he made a statement June 8th of 2021, and the reason he said that he didn't want the For the People Act was because it was too partisan.
Fuck him, okay? The party in power is the party in power. The Republicans never worry about that, do they? Not that they actually ever write any legislation, but they don't certainly worry about what they forced through. George W. Bush, when he was elected, didn't worry about any of that stuff. Donald Trump didn't worry about any of executive orders being too partisan. I'm tired of listening to Joe Manchin, okay? Joe Manchin, in my opinion, we got to be able to find one moderate candidate that believes a woman has a right to choose and that believes in LGBT civil rights that can beat this idiot, because he is a burr on the ass of progress.
And that seat is very vulnerable to a Republican attack, but you might try to freaking, yeah, exactly. Oh, that's what I was.
You should just switch sides. Just go ahead and get it over with.
Right.
Then we know what we're dealing with instead of dealing with all of this nonsense.
So we have two voting rights acts, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is still in play. It passed the House. Okay. But these are two different bills. It's not a substitution for HR 1.
For the People Act passed the House, right?
Yeah, it passed the House. Okay. It did pass the House, but it was blocked in the Senate. Okay. The For the People Act is HR 1.
Okay. So we need to try to push that through now. You know, we have nothing to lose right now.
So this is what
come January, they're both going to have to go back through the House again. And with the GOP in control of the House, it ain't ever happening. Right.
You might be able to get the John Lewis bill passed because there are some Republicans who are willing to even look at it.
Okay.
But no way with the For the People Act. So this is the John Lewis Act. Here's what it's going to do. Create a pathway for citizens for the federal government to challenge new voter laws in court, particularly if parties can show the new law fringes on minority voting rights. There you go. Require public notice for any changes made to voting laws in a state or public subdivision. So this is talking, this is about changing districts and all that. Providing new rules for polling places on Native American reservations. And requiring many categories of change in state or local election procedures to go through a process called pre-clearance, essentially approval from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division from before being implemented, which is all fine and well. That would have prevented those 4 states and possibly prevented Florida from being redistricted in the way that it was. But it's kind of, in the situation of this past election, too little, too late. And the last one is the one that they're going to fight over. So the last bullet point is the most important and contentious one. The bill would require changes to a whole lot of different kinds of laws and voting procedures to be subject to federal pre-clearance, including changes to a number of at-large elected positions within a state or subdivision, redistricting. Redistricting is a huge one. Voter ID requirements, alterations to multilingual voting materials, changes to precinct location or early voting access, and changes to how voter rolls are purged. The one thing that I don't know is if this law would help strengthen cases currently in court, which I doubt. Also, you're dealing with the Supreme. A lot of these cases are going to go to federal court now. Now you're going to have to deal with potentially the Supreme Court. So, yeah. The next thing I want to talk about, a subject near and dear to my heart, which is labor unions. Okay. Labor unions help organize and energize people from different walks of life. Okay. This was just hold on one second. This was just a search engine of different things from the Associated Press talking about labor unions. Okay. And a lot of this is about fighting for unions in Amazon. If you remember, 3 Los Angeles council members were asked to leave. I guess that was a labor issue. Amazon suspends at least 50 workers after a protest, et cetera, et cetera. So
we should also mention here that labor unions are instrumental in getting the vote out.
Yeah.
You know, this particular midterm, we should look to see if we can find something for that for the future, Dave, to talk about. They had their biggest voter drive since the 60s, I believe. And we ought to see how many people they were able to add to the rolls. We got to see if there's something somewhere that indicates that. We can update people the next meeting. But labor unions, you know, I don't know when it died, but labor unions used to be one of the biggest drivers of voters. And we need to get back to that again. Because if we're talking about the fact that the majority of people in this country are everyday workers, and there are the billionaires and the millionaires are few and far between. You know, that whole American dream thing, the American dream today is just being able to get a fucking job and not be mistreated at it.
Right.
Get the vote out. And we need to make sure that that continues.
I want to backtrack for a second because I missed an article, and it is relatively important. The Washington Post did post a potential solution to gerrymandering, and that is putting multiple representatives in one district. So, and then you get into ranked choice voting and all that kind of thing. That's a future thing to look into. And progressives are all about ranked choice voting. And if you look at Alaska has ranked choice voting, and look at what we just did there. We just grabbed a seat that we haven't had in a long time.
And by the way,
with Peltola.
The other thing that people will have to accept if we move towards ranked choice voting is it takes longer to get the process done. Okay.
Right.
Got nothing to do with cheating. It's the way that works. All right.
Because it takes longer to count the votes, because you have to look at, you know, not one vote, but like 5 or 6 votes per person.
Right.
And you have to, you know, and you have to prioritize it and all that kind of stuff. It takes triple, you know, at least triple the amount of time. So, all right. There's an example of getting a vote out and how it affected one particular election. And I thought it was relatively telling that I couldn't find that much on this governor, this newly elected governor, and that is Tina Kotek, which we mentioned. Oregon's largest labor union doubles down on Democrat Tina Kotek, kicking in $1 million for that Democrat in Oregon. And she did win. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Labor unions can provide resources and can provide funding and support and voters to candidates. So let's see. I'm gonna. All right, stop it. As I mentioned, I just threw a quick article in here talking about the average number of work hours per week. An average person who is non-retired works at least a little under 8 hours. Not everybody is a full-time worker, and you know that. Some people have 2 part-time jobs, but you spend around a third of your day at work. So work conditions are important, and respect and dignity is important. I just threw in an article about 4 unions pushing for more diverse and inclusive workplaces. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. We have the American Federation of Teachers, the AFL-CIO, and the United Steelworkers. And you can check that out. Also,
the nurses.
The nurses are huge.
They were huge for Bernie Sanders. I can tell you that.
Yep. They were huge.
Yep.
And the Postal Workers Union can be huge because they have actually they have 3 different unions, so that can be big. There was another article I have here, 48 workplace statistics. You're talking about how things have changed over time after COVID, and how they're going to be more off-site working environment opportunities and things of that nature. Here's a few statistics that you might want to think about. 58% of all employees in the riskiest jobs are women. 1 in 3 labor force participants in the United States is a millennial. Women account for 51.9% of the U.S. labor force by 2060. We have 40, I don't care about that. Anxiety and depression cost the global economy $1 trillion each year. The one that I didn't care about, I'll throw it in there because 42% of employers in pet-friendly workplaces say pets increase the staff's productivity. I don't know about that because I know. Well, when the cat's like jumping on my chair and stuff when I'm trying to live stream, I don't know. I gently disagree with that. Here's one. I want people to understand that you might not like your union and might complain, hey, the unions only protect the guys who never come to work, or the guys who really don't work that hard or whatever. Labor unions have had a history of getting you things like a 40-hour work week, 8 hours, overtime pay, eliminating protecting children through child labor laws, workplace protections, things of that nature, and equal opportunity laws and anti-discrimination laws, and FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. So here's one thing. There were I want to show a couple more things if I can, if it's going to let me. I just did a search, okay, and the top article I did put up as a links, and we'll talk about it. So I just did a search of when you see discrimination in the workplace, what do you do? And there is all sorts of different discrimination that you might not have thought about. Okay. Gender identity with pronouns, an epileptic in a winery, people thinking that they're drunk. Okay, accent discrimination, people who are over 40 experiencing ageism. A lot of stuff that I wouldn't even thought about. But for a second, because I know Deb has firsthand experience with this recently too.
Oh yes.
Everything you need to know about gender pronouns at work.
Yep.
It is discrimination.
It is. So especially in the state of Massachusetts, because as you know, I have a transgender child. This is a really good state to be going through that process in compared to say, a state like Texas, where they're trying to just basically legislate these people out of existence. But I recently had a very young person, 21 years old, moved to the state from Texas because she is transgender and was looking for a better place to be, and ran into a fucking buzzsaw in my work environment, with someone who refused to call her by her name and referred to her continuously as him. It's unacceptable, okay? This is a small request, okay? When I went to work there, I didn't want to be called Debbie, because that is what my father used to call me. That is what they called me when I was a child. I prefer to be called Deb. Now, I requested that. I don't go off the chain when someone calls me Debbie, because that's my name. But, every time I hear Debbie, I think of the little heart over the eye. And, it drives me fucking crazy, okay?
Right.
It's not the same to mess up my name and to refuse to call someone Alexis when that's her name and refer to her as Alex. It's not okay. It's not okay. That is a simple fucking request that anyone should be able to manage. The same person has to remember everybody else's name that works there. There's no way that that's done by mistake. I'm sorry. That just flies in the face of all kinds of fucking logic.
Names turn into names turns into identity. By the way, I don't like being called David. Anytime I did something wrong when I was a kid, I was called David. Yeah, so I'm like, I prefer you call me Dave. And I've had a couple of people, very few, say, well, that's what's on your birth certificate, isn't it? I was like, I just prefer to be called Dave, if you don't mind. And if they get really stupid, then we might have an issue, because they're going to be a jerk. You also have Chinese Americans who prefer to be called by their American names. Okay.
Right.
Call them by their American names. Okay.
No one's asking you to freaking cut your hands and feet off. Okay. It's not a big request here, folks. You know what? Cut the shit.
What I am saying is, if we are going to turn this around, we need to listen to one another. And even if we're different, we can come to an agreement to respect one another. Dignity and respect. That's all you're looking for. You might disagree with somebody, but you can come to a respectful agreement. Unlike many of the right-wingers who can't even imagine John Fetterman being able to do his job because he's different, because he had a stroke and he has a condition. Or, someone who happens to be Black or Hispanic or whatever, and you think that they can't do a job, or you think that a gay person can't teach because they're going to indoctrinate children. Stop already, okay?
Right.
We're asking for basic human rights and equal opportunity. That's all we're asking for. Okay? And better living conditions, infrastructure, better roads, drinkable water, all that stuff. That's what we're asking for from our government. Where are we going to get that? We're going to get that from the Republicans? Are we going to get respect and dignity from the Republicans? I don't think so.
Not unless you're Lily White, conservative and carrying a gun. You ain't going to get no respect from them. And you know what? Can I just say something here? Just because it's really stuck right here in my craw. The immigrants aren't taking your jobs. They're here to do the jobs Americans refuse to do, okay, for lower wages. Do we understand each other here? Okay? All right. I have police officers who moonlight as contractors when they're not on the job. And all of their workers are immigrants because they do a great job, he said. That's why. It's I'm tired of hearing the nonsense. This is all the same shit that we've had in history before. And yes, you know, I know we're considered an intelligent species here in the United States, but the fact of the matter is there are a lot of smart people in Germany whose heads were twisted too. So just remember that as you move down the road towards fascism.
And one more thing, there are all sorts of different tripwires and mindsets that people have had. Men who think certain things about women, women who think certain things about men. The Gen Z generation who think that we're the enemy, that the baby boomers are the enemy. We're not the enemy. We have Monday knowledge. You have Friday knowledge. We will help you get there. I swear to God. But you can't just push everything through within a year. It's not going to happen. We have been there. We were the Gen Z 20, 30 years ago.
Somebody fought for your gay rights. Somebody fought for your labor rights. It wasn't you, okay? I promise you, because I would have seen you there.
When I talk to a labor rep who isn't retired yet, and they're few and far between now, but some guys are still around who were in the 70s, who like were in that NELC or the large postal strike, who gave me my rights. I thank them and I listen to them and I listen to what they're saying and what their perspective is because they've been there. Okay. So, and everybody is going to have different experiences, but it is possible. Deb and I and Sarah and everybody here, we are examples of that. Deb and I are very different, in terms of demographics.
No.
We are.
Yeah.
Well, I think so, yeah. So, and we have cultivated a relationship and a show over the past 4 years that hopefully helps people. You can do it too. In some way, you can work with people who are different from you. Just listen to them and try to get through their thick head.
Right.
Sometimes it's very, very difficult. It's just the tiniest little thing and the tiniest little preconception that you have might create an argument. So, but just think about it, and then we are all fighting for the same thing.
Right.
We're all fighting for the same thing.
I also don't want to hear baby boomers saying that, the Gen Zers are going to save us. You know what? That's fucking ridiculous. We are all in here. We're all in this thing together here. We all need all hands on deck on the Democratic side, cooperating with each other.
Exactly.
The boomers aren't dead yet. We got a lot of shit left in us. And
right.
We've come a long way. Okay. We were here during the initial civil rights movements. You were not. All right. And you know what? In 40 years, you'll be saying this to the generations that are 40 years out from you. Okay. You will have fought for shit that they've never seen. All right. We all need to be all hands on deck, all together, united with a united front. I don't want to hear any newly elected Gen Zers mouthing off. Okay. You've got a lot to learn yet. You've never been in government before.
By the way, Deb was around. I was around too, but I was like a child, like an infant. She was around during the 1968 DNC, National Democratic Convention. She was around. She saw it. She was paying attention. Okay. I was around. We were around during the Rainbow Coalition. We saw it rise. We saw it fall. We saw the Reform Party rise, and we saw it fall. We saw Minnesota politics, the Democratic resurgent rise, and we saw it fall. We saw why it did and what we can do to prevent all of that.
In 1968, I was 14.
Yeah.
I was a political junkie at a very young age. I was 14 years old. I watched the entire thing unfold in front of me. In 1970, I was 16 when Kent State happened. In 1971, I was going around to college campuses talking about what happened at Kent State. At 17 years old, I had an FBI file. I know, that seems ridiculous, but I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been agitating for a long time. So, you know what? Instead of dismissing the older generations, maybe you want to be listening to them. Maybe you don't want to do things the same way, but maybe you can find a better way to do them. We didn't have the same things that are available to you today. Let's just call this for what it is. We all need to be united in this front, because no one group is going to beat fascism. It's going to take a village, folks. Let me just steal a, phrase from your past.
And I saw it in real time. I saw the young, the progressives help take a seat away from the Democrats. And he was a moderate Democrat, sorry. But what did that do for us? Okay. And we're fighting, we have young progressives fighting with the moderates. Both groups need to get over that. They need to get over it quickly.
Now, I'm not saying we don't want to push this party further to the left, because we do. But
absolutely,
the fact of the matter is, not all of your constituents out there are further to the left. There are still moderate Democrats that vote. You can't disenfranchise members of the party, okay? And by the way, most of the moderate Democrats respect a woman's right to choose and respect LGBT civil rights. So, and respect immigrant rights. You need to include everybody in this ball of wax. It isn't just about your generation. So
I have said this over and over again. If you want to create more, more opportunities for the for the progressives, you defeat the moderates in the primary. But if you don't, you support that. And I said it, I think I said it last week. Bernie Sanders got skewered for that. And where did we get? What did we get? We got Donald Trump. And he's not going away. We didn't just have Donald Trump for 4 years. We had Donald Trump, and now we have an army of little Donald Trump minions everywhere.
Right.
So, learn from our mistakes, please. And right now, we need to support Warnock, whether it's give $10, phone bank, text bank, whatever. Support, tweet, retweet, whatever it is, whatever little thing you can do.
Right, and I will say it again, early voting is in his favor, but we all know that the GOP doesn't do early voting. So that little surge is going to come at the end. Just because he's in the lead now, it doesn't mean it's over. This goes to December 6th, okay?
By the way, mail-in is over. Mail-in voting, and I told you it was gonna be quick. Mail-in voting is done. So if you want to vote for Warnock, you might have to stand in line, but it's going to be worth it.
Yep.
We can't have Herschel Walker in there. We have to have Raphael Warnock. We have to. Okay. If you didn't want Warnock, you should have voted him out in the primary. Okay. That's the reality of this. Herschel Walker is a cancer.
He is.
And by the way, I want before we go, I want this to be another wake up. Just because Herschel Walker is a clown and a joke and could barely put two words together, basically two letters together to spell cat, he is not harmless. He is dangerous.
He's Donald Trump's useful idiot. That's what he is. And you know what? How many times have you seen him in a video flanked by two other Republicans because no one wants to leave him alone with his mouth? Okay, when he does a stump speech and he's up on the podium by himself, it's all bets off, because the last time he did that, we get a lecture about werewolves and vampires. Okay. He must have been talking about the GOP because, I don't know any real, vampires and, werewolves except for in that party. Bloodsuckers is all I'm going to say.
There is a commercial out there. I'll try to find it. I might even put it in the long show, resources. They talk about his violent history, his violent past, his past involving assaulting women. The fact that he talked about pointing a gun to his head and pulling the trigger. And talking about, assaulting people. No. And again, he doesn't even live in the state, according to him, so he shouldn't even be running.
According
we had
to
another
his tax records, his permanent residence is Texas. That's a little problem. Okay. That's a little problem.
You need to also have baseline requirements, not just age, but domestic violence should be an eliminator. That should be a deal breaker.
That should be a deal breaker.
Felony record, deal breaker. Child molestation or any of that. Who ran that one time that he was caught with teenage girls? Which that was like
Matt Gates, somebody else.
It was somebody else. It was Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon supported him. I think you know who I'm talking about. I can't remember the guy's name right off the top of my head.
Right?
No, it's not Lathan Lawson. It's somebody who was actually in office and he lost. I can't remember who it was.
I can't remember.
But these people exist.
Yep.
Okay. People
and
who,
by the way, they have second lives. If you think Madison Cawthorn is gone, he's moved to Florida. He's already basically bailed on his job, even though he's being paid by the taxpayers until the 1st of January. Okay. He's left his constituents hanging in the air. He's emptied out his office and he's moved to $1 million mansion in Florida because I can promise you in 2024, he's going to run down there somewhere. This shit's never ending. These guys don't go away. We're left with a bunch of little Donald Trump minions. And even if he gets indicted tomorrow, this problem is still here tomorrow. Okay. It's here until all of these people are removed from office, whether it be by investigation and removal or by voting. My position is we can do it faster than the government. We need to be ready to vote them out. It's going to take several cycles. Even Liz Cheney said that months ago.
Right.
So,
and by the way, for those of you who voted for Madison Cawthorn, even in the primary, who's representing you now? No one.
Nope. He's left.
No one is representing you now.
You're talking about constituents who he was in the middle of working on stuff for them, and he has just basically left them high and dry. They're calling his office and getting a recorded message. He's not returning any calls. Okay. He's a stiff. He does not belong elected again. Actually, if we had any kind of accountability for the people in office, he would not be allowed to pursue another seat anywhere in this country when he can't finish the job he's been elected to do just because he fucking lost. Okay. He has a responsibility.
Not only that, Deb, if you just bailed on your job for 2 weeks and didn't call, no show, whatever, wouldn't most people?
See you later.
Yeah, you'd be fired. You'd be done.
Yep.
Okay.
They'd give me a written warning. They'd give me a verbal warning first. If it continued, they'd give me a written warning and then see you later. Goodbye. Okay. The GOP leader McCarthy, just like everything else, he doesn't shut up his anti-Semites. He doesn't shut up his racists. And he certainly hasn't called out Madison Cawthorn. And he won't because he's a pussy. I'm just saying. Okay.
Well, you keep on getting me to think of more things. Donald Trump, who does he represent? He represents himself. He is threatening Jack Smith's wife and his sister-in-law, I believe. He's doxing him, all sorts of stuff. Who is he representing? He's representing himself. Right. He's protecting himself. Okay, that's unconscionable.
Right. And he's doing this publicly on social media, by the way. So, you know what? And nary a word from anybody in the leadership of the GOP. They just kind of like pretending it's not there, because that's what they do. So, I can't even. So, can we call this one over? Are we done? Okay, gang, we are done for tonight. We shall see you next week. And you have a lovely evening. This is not Sunday, it's Monday.